You still think waterfront living in the US is only for the rich? That belief can quietly drain your retirement if you choose wrong. Because while some places drive costs up fast, there are hidden corners across the country where living by the water stays surprisingly manageable. Research into housing trends and migration patterns shows that moving just slightly away from crowded hotspots changes everything. Number 10. Toledo, Ohio. This one catches people off guard. Toledo is officially a city, yet parts of it feel more like a quiet, town-like waterfront community hiding in plain sight. It sits at the western edge of Lake Erie, with the Maumee River shaping the area and giving it real water access instead of the watered-down version people often imagine. That matters. This is not a place where the waterfront exists only in photos. It shows up in daily life. You see it along the riverfront paths at Middle Grounds Metro Park. You feel it in the open shoreline atmosphere around Maumee Bay State Park. You notice it in the way the region gives people room to breathe, instead of that packed, high-pressure energy found in more famous shoreline destinations. What makes Toledo interesting is not luxury, it is usability. In many waterfront markets, the view becomes the bill. Here, the overall cost picture stays more grounded than many people expect from a place connected to both a Great Lake and a major river. That is why Toledo keeps entering the conversation when affordable waterfront living comes up. The financial pressure is lighter. Daily life feels more manageable. The water does not feel reserved for a tiny group of people with oversized budgets. It feels local. It feels reachable. It feels like part of ordinary living. The lifestyle side is stronger than outsiders expect. Middle Grounds Metro Park brings river views, walking trails, and the kind of setting where a simple morning stroll feels better than it should. Toledo Botanical Garden adds wide green space and a softer, more settled mood to the area. Then there is Maumee Bay State Park, where beaches, marshland, bird life, and open Lake Erie scenery widen the picture even more. That gives Toledo a real advantage. You are not getting one narrow version of waterfront life. You are getting river energy, lake access, green space, and quieter corners all in the same region. Toledo also works because it is not all scenery and no substance. ProMedica Toledo Hospital adds practical stability. The Toledo Museum of Art gives the city cultural depth that makes the area feel richer than people expect. That balance matters. A waterfront place becomes far more compelling when it still feels practical after the novelty wears off. Toledo does. It offers water, infrastructure, recognizable local landmarks, and calmer pockets that feel more like smaller waterfront towns than a hard-edged city. Number 9. Decatur, Alabama. Now, this is a very different kind of waterfront place. Decatur does not sell the flashy beach fantasy, it leans into something calmer. Set along the Tennessee River, this smaller, town-like area moves at a slower pace, which is exactly why it keeps getting attention in conversations about affordable, year-round living. The cost picture here stays notably lighter than the national norm, and that matters more than people think. In many waterfront locations, the scenery is beautiful, but the day-to-day math gets ugly fast. Decatur works the other way around. The river is part of ordinary life, not a luxury add-on. That shift changes everything. You can spend time near the water, enjoy open green space, and still live in a place where the overall financial pressure feels more manageable. Wheeler National Wildlife Refuge adds a huge part of the appeal. It stretches along the Tennessee River and brings bird life, wetlands, trails, and that quiet natural atmosphere that makes the area feel bigger and more peaceful than a typical small city. Then there is Point Mallard Park, which gives Decatur another layer of livability with park space, recreation, and a local rhythm that feels familiar instead of overcrowded. Downtown also has more personality than outsiders expect. The Cook Museum of Natural Science brings real energy to the center of the city, while Decatur Morgan Hospital adds practical stability for people thinking beyond scenery alone. That balance is the reason Decatur stands out. It gives you river access, nature, local infrastructure, and a slower daily pace without the inflated pressure that often comes with better-known waterfront spots. It is less about showing off and more about living well. Number 8. Munising, Michigan. This place feels almost unfair. Munising is one of those rare small waterfront communities where the scenery looks expensive, but the town itself still feels grounded and lived in. Set on the south shore of Lake Superior, it serves as the western gateway to Pictured Rocks, which means daily life here comes with sandstone cliffs, forested shoreline, beaches, waterfalls, and open water that looks more like an ocean than a lake. That alone gives Munising a very different personality from the usual retirement spots. It is quieter. It is more dramatic. It feels less like a resort town and more like a real place where nature never stops showing off. The affordability side is what makes people pause. Compared with many famous waterfront destinations, living here remains more manageable overall, especially for people who care more about beauty, outdoor access, and peace than nightlife or big city buzz. That is a big reason Munising keeps standing out in conversations around budget-friendly waterfront living. You are not paying for hype. You are paying for a place that actually delivers. Binsfeld Bayshore Park and Marina helps prove that point. It sits right in town, giving Munising an everyday connection to the lake instead of a distant postcard view. Then you have the local rhythm of downtown, where coffee shops, small businesses, and harbor views make the place feel personal rather than overbuilt. Munising Memorial Hospital adds practical stability, which matters more than people admit when they picture year-round living. Then there is the four-seasons side of the story. Warmer months bring boat tours, hiking, paddling, and beach walks. Colder months shift the mood completely, turning the region into a landscape of snow, ice formations, and quiet trails. That variety keeps the place from feeling one-dimensional. It is not just pretty, it is deeply atmospheric. It is also the kind of town where people talk about the northern lights without sounding dramatic, which tells you everything about the setting. Number 7. New Bern, North Carolina. New Bern pulls people in a different way. It does not hit you with flashy beach energy or a resort town attitude. It feels calmer than that, more settled, more lived in. Officially, it is a city. In practice, it behaves much more like one of those classic southern waterfront towns where the water shapes the entire mood of the place. That starts with the setting. New Bern sits at the meeting point of the News River and the Trent River, not far from Pamlico Sound, and that geography gives the town a softer rhythm than many better-known East Coast waterfront spots. Union Point Park shows that immediately. Open lawns, river views, boats nearby, and a breeze coming off the water make the whole place feel easy to settle into. The appeal here is not just scenery, though, it is the balance. Compared with many waterfront communities on the East Coast, New Bern stays more approachable for full-time living. The financial pressure does not come in with the same force. That is a major reason smaller river towns like this keep surfacing in retirement and livability conversations. The place feels practical first, picturesque second, which is usually the smarter formula for everyday life. Then the personality starts to show itself. Tryon Palace gives New Bern real historical gravity because the city served as North Carolina's colonial capital and still carries that older, rooted atmosphere through its streets and architecture. You can feel it downtown. The place does not look manufactured, it looks earned. Then comes one of those details that makes a location stick in your memory. New Bern is also known as the birthplace of Pepsi, and that small piece of Americana gives the downtown area a little extra charm without making it feel gimmicky. On the practical side, Carolina East Medical Center adds the kind of stability that matters when a place is being considered for year-round living instead of a weekend escape. That is what New Bern gets right. It offers rivers, history, walkability, local identity, and everyday infrastructure without tipping too far in any one direction. It feels personal. It feels usable. It feels grounded. Number 6. Melbourne, Florida. Now this one changes the mood completely. Melbourne gives you Florida waterfront living, but not in the overhyped, high-pressure way people usually picture it. Officially, it is a city, yet many parts of it feel more like smaller coastal areas stitched together by water, bridges, beaches, and everyday routines that move at a more relaxed speed. The setting does a lot of the work. Melbourne sits along the Indian River Lagoon, with the Atlantic Ocean just across the barrier island, so you are getting both sides of the waterfront equation. You have river views, causeways, marinas, and calm inland water on one side. Then you have open beach life, surf, and sea air just a short drive away. That mix gives the place a wider appeal than many retirement spots that only offer one version of waterfront living. The affordability side is what keeps Melbourne in the conversation. Compared with Florida's better-known coastal hotspots, this area has long been viewed as a more manageable entry point into the beach and water lifestyle. That does not mean cheap. It means more realistic. The overall pressure is often lower than in the state's headline destinations, which is exactly why people looking for year-round livability keep circling back to places like this. Then the local identity kicks in. Melbourne is part of the Space Coast, so this is one of those rare waterfront places where a quiet walk near the Indian River can be followed by the completely normal sight of a rocket launch in the distance. That detail alone makes it memorable. Downtown Melbourne brings shops, restaurants, and a walkable historic core, while the O'Galley Arts District adds a more creative side with galleries, murals, and a local feel that keeps the city from blending into every other Florida coastal stop. Nearby beaches around Indialantic and Melbourne Beach add another layer because the ocean is not some distant bonus here. It is part of the rhythm. On the practical side, Holmes Regional Medical Center gives the area major healthcare depth, which matters when the idea is year-round living, not just a seasonal escape. That balance is what Melbourne gets right. It offers water access, beach proximity, local culture, healthcare, and a more grounded cost structure than people expect from coastal Florida. If this changed how you see waterfront living, subscribe and comment your top pick, because the next places get even more surprising. Number 5. Rockport, Texas. Now this is where the list slows down in the best possible way. Rockport does not try to overwhelm you. It is a real coastal town, sitting on Aransas Bay, and the entire place feels built around a gentler rhythm of life. The water is always close, the air feels different, the pressure feels lower. That is a big part of why Rockport keeps getting attention from people looking for a quieter waterfront lifestyle without the intensity of larger beach cities. The affordability story here is easier to understand than in many coastal spots. In bigger Gulf Coast markets, the cost of being near the water can rise fast, simply because demand gets louder and the map gets more crowded. Rockport feels different. It stays more grounded. The overall living picture is often seen as more manageable than in the better-known Texas coastal cities, which gives it a strong year-round appeal for people who want the water without paying for constant hype. Then the town starts showing off in its own way. Rockport Beach is one of the most recognizable places here, with calm water, a long shoreline, and a family-friendly feel that makes it less chaotic than many beach destinations. Fulton Mansion adds a completely different flavor, giving the area historic character tied to the old port and shipping story of the region. The Rockport Center for the Arts keeps the town from feeling sleepy, while the Bay Education Center adds a local connection to the Mission Aransas estuary and the coastal environment that shapes life here. Nature is a major part of the identity, too. Birding is not just a hobby in this area, it is part of the culture. The nearby Aransas National Wildlife Refuge is one of the most famous wildlife areas on the Texas coast, especially for migratory birds and the whooping crane. That gives Rockport a personality that feels calmer, more observant, and less commercial than many waterfront places. On the practical side, emergency care is available in town, which matters when the conversation is about full-time living and not just a short escape. That is what makes Rockport memorable. It is not flashy. It is steady. It gives you bay access, beach time, local art, wildlife, and a true small-town coastal atmosphere without feeling cut off from everyday needs. Number 4. Cape Coral, Florida. Now this is where the whole waterfront idea gets turned sideways. Cape Coral is technically a city, yet the way it is built makes it feel more like a chain of smaller, town-like waterfront communities stitched together by canals, docks, neighborhood basins, and quiet streets. That difference changes everything. In most waterfront markets, access to the water is limited, which is exactly why the pressure rises so fast. Here, the water is spread across the map. It is part of the design. With more than 400 miles of navigable waterways, plus direct connection to the Caloosahatchee River and routes toward the Gulf, Cape Coral does not treat the waterfront like some rare luxury sitting behind a gate. It makes it feel woven into everyday life. That is one reason this place stays in the affordability conversation. The structure of the city creates more waterfront access than people expect, and that wider supply helps the overall picture feel more realistic than many famous coastal names. The mood also shifts depending on where you are. Four Freedoms Park gives you one of the calmer public waterfront settings in the city, with basin views and a quieter local pace. Yacht Club Community Park has long been one of the most recognizable water-facing spots here, tying the city's identity to boating, river access, and that classic Southwest Florida feel. Then there is the practical side, which matters more than people admit. Cape Coral Hospital gives the area year-round stability, making the city feel more usable for full-time living rather than just appealing in photos. What also helps is the variety. Some parts feel residential and slow. Other areas lean harder into boating and canal life. You can move from a calm neighborhood water view to a broad river setting without feeling like you left the same community. That flexibility gives Cape Coral an edge. It is not a tiny beach town. It is a water-shaped place where the waterfront is everywhere, and that changes the math, the pace, and the experience. Number 3, Astoria, Oregon. This place does not look like it should be affordable at all. Astoria feels cinematic from the first glance. It sits near the mouth of the Columbia River, close to where the river meets the Pacific, and that gives the whole town a mood that is hard to fake. Fog, hills, old houses, working docks, river traffic, and views that shift by the hour make it feel more like a film set than a real place people live in every day. Yet that is exactly what makes Astoria stand out. Officially, it is a small city. In reality, it behaves much more like a quiet coastal town where the pace is slower, the scenery is constant, and the waterfront still feels connected to daily life instead of being locked away as a luxury backdrop. The appeal here is not flashy sunshine. It is atmosphere. Compared with many West Coast waterfront locations, Astoria remains a more approachable option for people who want riverfront living without stepping into the pressure of a major coastal market. That difference is why smaller Pacific Northwest communities like this keep showing up in livability and retirement conversations. The place feels rich in character, not inflated by image. Then the local landmarks start doing their work. The Astoria Riverwalk keeps the waterfront active and visible, giving the town a lived-in relationship with the Columbia instead of a distant one. The Astoria column adds one of the most recognizable views anywhere on this list, looking out over river, forest, and bridge in a way that instantly explains why people fall for the place. Downtown has its own pull too. The Flavel House Museum gives Astoria a layer of old maritime wealth and history, while the port area keeps the town from feeling frozen in the past. It still works, it still moves, it still feels tied to the river. On the practical side, Columbia Memorial Hospital adds the kind of local stability that matters for full-time living. That balance is what makes Astoria memorable. It offers scenery, history, walkability, healthcare, and a waterfront identity that feels personal instead of overbuilt. Number 2, Fort Pierce, Florida. This is the kind of Florida place that makes people stop and rethink the whole map. Fort Pierce is officially a city. Yet parts of it feel much more like a laid-back beach town that somehow slipped past the full wave of hype. It sits on the Atlantic side of the state, tied closely to the Indian River Lagoon, with the Fort Pierce Inlet opening the town to open water, boating, fishing, and that easy coastal rhythm people usually assume comes with much heavier financial pressure. That is what makes this place stand out. Compared with many better-known Florida beach destinations, Fort Pierce has long been seen as a more realistic way into waterfront living. The atmosphere feels less polished, less crowded, and in many ways more usable. You are not just looking at the water here. The water is part of daily life. You see it around the Fort Pierce City Marina. You feel it near Jetty Park, where locals watch boats pass through the inlet and look out toward the Atlantic. Then there is Fort Pierce Inlet State Park, which adds beaches, trails, fishing access, and a much more natural side of the coastline. That mix matters. It gives the area more range than a typical beach town built around one strip of sand. The town also has identity. The Sunrise Theater gives downtown an old Florida character that keeps the place from feeling generic. The National Navy UDT SEAL Museum adds a layer of history that very few waterfront towns can claim, tied directly to the area's military past. Those details give Fort Pierce more substance than people expect. On the practical side, the city has local medical access, while the wider Treasure Coast adds even more support for year-round living. That balance is a major reason Fort Pierce keeps surfacing in conversations about affordable coastal retirement. It offers beach access, marina life, river and lagoon connections, recognizable landmarks, and a slower pace than Florida's louder coastal names. It feels less like a place trying to sell you a fantasy and more like a place where people can actually settle in. But the number one spot breaks the pattern completely because it proves you do not even need the ocean to get the waterfront lifestyle people chase for years. Number 1. Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Now this is the twist almost nobody sees coming. The number 1 spot is not on the ocean at all. It is in the Arizona desert. That sounds wrong for about 2 seconds until you look at what Lake Havasu City actually offers. This place sits along Lake Havasu on the Colorado River, and the whole city is built around the water in a way that feels surprisingly complete. You still get marinas, you still get boating, you still get shoreline views, fishing, swimming, paddleboarding, and sunset scenes that look like they belong in a far more expensive coastal market. The difference is that this version of waterfront living avoids a lot of the pressure that comes with oceanfront demand. That is exactly why Lake Havasu City stands out. It gives people a full waterfront lifestyle without forcing them into the financial intensity that usually follows famous beach towns. The affordability story here makes sense once you see the structure. In coastal areas, you are often paying not just for the water, but for the crowd, the prestige, and the limited supply of shoreline. Lake Havasu City changes that formula. It is built around a large, recreational lake, not an oceanfront strip with endless tourism pressure. That shift alone changes the overall feel. The city still has demand, of course, but the cost picture remains more controlled than many better-known waterfront destinations. In simple terms, it delivers much of the same lifestyle benefit with a very different financial atmosphere. That is a big reason inland lake communities keep appearing in conversations about year-round living and retirement. Then the local landmarks start doing their part. London Bridge is the obvious one. It is not just a gimmick here. It gives the city a memorable identity and anchors the waterfront area with shops, walking paths, and non-stop visual character. Rotary Community Park adds another side of the city, with beaches, trails, and broad lake views that make the water feel accessible rather than reserved. Lake Havasu State Park strengthens that even more, giving the area camping, shoreline recreation, boat launches, and a direct relationship with the lake that feels active all year instead of seasonal. The practical side is there too. Havasu Regional Medical Center adds the kind of real-world stability that matters when the idea is full-time living, not just a weekend fantasy. That balance is what makes Lake Havasu City a true number one. It is memorable, it is scenic, it is active. It gives you the waterfront lifestyle people chase for years, but in a form that feels more realistic, more usable, and far less tied to the usual coastal hype. Then again, before anyone gets too comfortable with the dream, there is one more part people almost always forget to think about: hidden truths. But here is what people forget. Waterfront living can save your stress or quietly raise it. Flood risk changes insurance. Humidity invites mold. Salt air wears down metal, paint, and outdoor fixtures faster than expected. Even calm-looking shorelines can bring erosion, storm damage, and higher upkeep over time. The real win is not just finding pretty water. It is finding a place where the view, the costs, and the maintenance still make sense together. That is the part most people miss. The best waterfront place is not always the most famous one. It is the one that still works after the view becomes normal, which is exactly why one of these places is sitting in plain sight right now and almost nobody sees it.